Hi guys, how are you doing? Today I have another new knife. This one is from Peter Carey and the model is called the Cayman. So Peter Carey has been making knives for over 20 years and his designs are very well received, I think. It's Most people when they look at the Peter Carey design, they either think, okay, that's all right, or they love it, like me when I look at this model. I think the Cayman is one of his most beautiful models, and yeah, let's jump into it. I think Peter Carey's work, um, it's very consistent across across times. This piece is actually from 2016, but if you get one from this year, which is 2023, it should feel pretty much the same. He's been focusing more on making new models rather than using different um, techniques to build the knife, or yeah. So the mechanics would feel the same. The finishing would look quite similar. The only thing between this one and one from say 2016, like this one, the only difference would be the model, and possibly the materials used on it. So let's walk in. This material on the blade is CPM 154. I think Peter does one of my most favorite finishing on any tactical maker, because his hand rub satin, check that out. The camera has a hard time focusing because it is so vibrant, but you can see the lines are really beautiful all the way through. You have that polished tip on both sides. Beautiful polish. He does a very similar polish on the scale. One thing I really like about Peter's, you know, finishing methods is that his scales, or his Timascus, this in this case I believe Zircuti, is very very vibrant, but you can't really smudge it. I try to put finger oils on it. It doesn't, it stays vibrant and it looks good, all the time, which is not the case for every one who colors Timascus. And the color that he put on this one, rich royal blue, is very consistent across the build. You can see sometimes some makers will have purple, blue, and it's just not as consistent. This one is pretty, very, very consistent. And another thing about Peter's work is that when you finish Zircuti, you can do it very, very fine polish, but those are the ones that can smudge very easily. I think he uses lower grit finishing, so it's still very much like a polished look, but it doesn't smudge. It's actually very resistant to scratching. It's I've carried this piece already, and there's zero marks because of how scratch resistant it is on this finishing. And to add on top of that, anytime you have Zircuti, where you have zirconium, that also makes it even more scratch resistant. And then check out the scale, black micarta, which he finishes to a similar, degree as the bolster. So it looks very, very nice. Let's zoom in. His fitment is lovely. The way he joins the materials is very lovely. And the way he stipples the liners is also, he does this on many of his builds, which is again extremely scratch resistant. So the whole knife is, except for the blade, is very scratch resistant. The blade is more polished, so if you do use it, it will scratch. But if you just plan to carry it and not use it as much, then this is the way to go. The backspacer is his dragon spine backspacer, which is one of his signatures. A nice lanyard loop integrated into it. This one came with a lanyard actually, but I took it out because I am not the type of person who likes to carry knife with the lanyard, because not as convenient for me. Peter's attention to detail when it comes to finishing is top notch, and it's one of my favorites because number one, it's super vibrant. Number two, it's quite scratch resistant, and yeah, it stays good looking, which I really appreciate. Now let's talk about the mechanics and the action. Perfect centering. This grind is a little bit difficult to do, and Peter does do all of his work, with manual machines, no CNC. The top part looks pretty good, almost perfectly symmetrical, similar to the bottom one, although yeah, it's very, very well done grind. It's also been hand ground, and if you listen to the action, anytime you flip a carry knife, it flies out, no matter how much effort you put on it. And this particular one has a double click, which I really love. It's very addicting. Just listen to that. Listen to the way the blade sucks in. Oh yeah. I love the way this thing fires. Not all of his knives actually do this double click action. I've had a few of them. I've had a few Peter Careys in the past, and actually only this one is the most consistent with this double click. It happens every single time. I'm not sure why that's the case. And if you do, want to have this very unique sound, I think it'll have to be piece by piece. I mean, when you're collecting knives at this level, you're not just finding a knife from a maker, because every knife is different, especially ones that are done with manual machines. But when it has a unique characteristic like this double click action, then you better hold on to it, because it's not easy to find, and not many makers do this double click action. The lock release, there is some positive lock, as we can see there. I don't want to call it lock stick, because I've had quite a few carries in the past, and a lot of the liner locks, I noticed they have positive lock. Yeah, we'll just say positive lock stick, but essentially there is resistance, when you're going to close it. If you don't like that, I think Peter's frame locks, the ones that I've had, have zero stick. I'm not sure why that's the case, but anyway, so if you want absolutely amazing lock release, don't go for the liner locks like this. But I've also noticed that these double click action also come, and the ones that I've seen are also in liner locks, so there's a trade-off there. I think the reason why Peter chose to do this is because, number one, the geometry of the liner lock usually the strength of the frame lock comes from when you grip the knife, you're also pushing the lock bar inward. So when you're cutting into something, the lock stays locked and it's very strong. Or especially when you're thrusting into something, you're also pushing that lock bar in instead of relying it to, stay locked. So it's stronger. But for liner locks, you can't do that, right? Because it's blocked by the bolster. So no matter how hard you grip, it's only the strength of the lock that's keeping the knife open. So having that little bit of positive lock, it does help to secure it a little bit more. So, depends on who you are. This is the way it's built. It's meant for, actual use, which you would prefer strong rather than someone who's just fidgeting, admittedly like me. And like a lot of you, I bet. So yeah, overall, lovely knife, amazing action. Ergonomics is pretty good. I'm reaching at the edge here. The jimping a little bit sharp and not as effective, but not bad. And the blade, actually I forgot to mention the sharpness. The bevel, this part is quite very sharp. It can slice very, very well. This part less so, again because it is quite thick. So it is, I guess the tanto blade shape is not meant to be slicing all the way to the edge, only in the middle portion, and this is supposed to be strong as it's intended. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this very lovely Peter Carey, and I'll see you next time.